out, guys.
Well, you'll just bleep it out and make me sound smart.
Yeah, that's right. I can do that.
You can do that. I was a little in my feelings though today, and I put it in the Discord channel, but Mondays at the post office kind of suck as a general rule, and my route is technically, I don't know if it's classified overburdened in the office because I've only had one walk. Like they do an evaluation every couple, like they're supposed to do one like every year, at least one. And the one that I got, it's like, I think it's called there's the form is something 99. And when I got my walk along, the day that I had it, I was at less than 50% volume. So it was an incredibly light day, and we made it back in 8 hours. And, but it was like, and I told the guy who was walking with me, and he even sort of to a certain extent, like agreed with me, but it was like this whole, I said, well, what it's like, we got back and I looked at him, I said, now, can you imagine if I actually had mail today? He was like, yeah, I can. Like, so he was even like acknowledging the fact that like the day was ridiculously light and that like, yeah, we were coming in just under 8 hours. Like it was like 7 hours and 57 minutes or something like that. And, you know, it's kind of like one of those things where anyways, so, but my route, it sort of like goes unsaid that my route is heavy. And on Mondays, we have like these flyers that we get. We call they're circulars, right? And we they're called plums. And typically they have to be out by Wednesday, but I like to get them done on Monday because Monday's heavy. I'm going to hit most of the stops anyways. And then it's like, it makes it so that I have like Monday's going to like, I know Monday's going to be a train wreck. Like I'm coming in and I'm expecting Monday to be crap. And I come in and that's my flow. Like that's the way I like to do it. Like you're going to come in, Monday's going to be like a train wreck garbage fire. And then like Tuesday's cool. Right. Well, today I got it's a pivot and it's like basically like 30 to 40 minutes off of somebody else's route. And so I was a little irritated about that. And then, you know, of course my coworkers are like running their mouths because they're just such bastions of encouragement and, you know, brotherly love. And they're sort of like needling me. And I just was like, I was not having it today. And then it started raining. And then there was all the stuff in my truck. Like I went out to my truck. So like these kids, they're not all kids, but,
they sure act like it.
They sure act like it. Yeah, no joke, right? So we have parcel runners who run Amazon packages on Sunday.
Yeah. Okay.
And Saturday before I leave, I try to make sure that I have like, if not a full tank, like more than like half a tank. And I usually leave it at 3/4 of a tank. Like that's like, even on a Saturday, I'm like, yo, like just, this is the lowest I'll go just because I know. And I came back and my tank was almost on E and they had left the dome light in on the back all day or all night, Sunday into Monday. And like, so the truck didn't want to start right away. And then it was like, there was no gas in it. And I was like, I'm going to find the person responsible for this. And I'm going to make such an example out of them that like CCAs and the part-timers for years will be like, no, you put gas in the truck when you're done and you put everything back the way it was, because if you don't, and Nate finds out, like, this is what he did to the last person. Like, you know, it's like the acts of violence that I wanted to unleash on this human being. And but it's just like, it takes 5 minutes of work, but it's like, and the thing is on Sunday, and I'm not trying to be unkind, on Sunday, you have the time. Like you're going to stop at Sheetz. You're going to stop at a gas station. You're like, I know because I used to do it. And it's like, I'm not saying, and I think the part that bothers me is that it's not the exception. It's the rule. I would say
Gotcha.
4 out of the last 5, 4 out of the last 6, sort of like Mondays when I come back, my truck is like either like the one, it wasn't so bad because I had topped it off completely and I came back on Monday to a half a tank and I'm like, it's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes and you don't even have to pay for the gas. All you have to do is put in your PIN, like put your card in and put your ID number in, and the post office pays for it. But then I have to figure out, like, I have to scramble on Monday, and when I literally do not have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, it's, I set myself up for six. Like, it's, the thing is, like, I set myself up and whoever follows me for success, right? That's like, I'm like, I set it up so that, like, if you come in on my route, like, it's cleaned up, it's super tight. Like, there's no like mess for you to clean up. Like, and Mondays too, like, I get to set the pace. Like, so if I get like my plums done on Monday, that means like the rest of my week, I can just sort of like, I have Wednesday is going to be a heavy day because we get neighbors, which is another circular. But then for the most part, it's just normal mail and packages. And it's like, you can sort of like, and you build these rhythms in. And so I came in, my truck was all like in its situation. And then like, I found out I got a pivot. So I was like, and it was a big enough pivot where I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this pivot and my plums. So I'm going to cut my plums. So now I got to deal with my plums tomorrow. And it was like, and I was like mad about that. And then it was freaking raining and I was mad about that. And then my coworkers suck. And I was mad about that. Like, and it was like the first 3 hours of my day. I was just like, I'm mad at everybody. I hate everything. This is the worst. Like, I want to fight the weather. Like me and the clouds are going to like throw hands. It was just like one of those days where I was just like, so, and like, and here's the thing. And even in the Discord, I said, like, I love my job. I really do. But on the days when it's bad, it's really bad. And it's like, it goes from like, I would say 9 days out of 10, love what I do. Even on hard days, it's like, but then when you get like that one, that's like today, when you get a day like today and you're just like, I was like, just felt like all day long, I was like minutes away from quitting, like just all day long. And it's just like, and you got to fight that. Like, and it's just like, it's tough. But I just said, yeah, it's just like, I don't know.
You talk to God. That's what I do. I'm like, oh, I know what you're doing. Okay, here we go.
And
I'm being
it's a lot of,
and I'm failing badly.
And I don't like this. I don't like this.
Is this how you learn patience?
Oh, never pray for patience.
Oh. It's like, yeah, that's one, that is the joke where it's like, never pray for patience. And because it's like, yeah. And it's like, and like, that's the thing. I wasn't asking for patience. I was like, God just was like, apparently like, hey, you need
what you need right now.
Yeah. And I was like, thanks. I hate it. So, but nice. Yeah, no, it was, I mean, it wasn't like, it was just like, all day long. And it's like,
totally.
And I'm just ready for like, and listen, I know that like this, like you guys, when I say this, like poor little Yankee, it was like 80 degrees, but with like 70% humidity.
That's gross, dude.
I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of the heat. Like listen, one of my coworkers, she's actually moving to Arizona, and she's like, yeah, but it's a dry heat. I was like, listen, I was like, I spent 15 months being deployed to Iraq. 130 degrees is still hot. Like the like dry heat. Nah. I'm like, listen, you got to have AC down there. And I was like, for a reason.
Yeah.
Cause like it's just hot. And I'm like, but like the humidity, I'm just like, and last week was like this really dry heat, but there was like no wind. And so it was just like, it was only like 85-ish degrees all week, but it was just like that heat was just like, you're just getting hammered. And it was like, you weren't really breaking a sweat. It was just like it was just a very like, I mean, you're sweating, but not like, if there's humidity in the air, like I just turn into like a hot, stinky, wet mess.
Right.
Like, but I feel okay because like, especially like if I'm moving, like I get the cool breeze and like my body is doing the thing it's supposed to be. Like it's sweating and it cools down and it does like all the, But like when it's just hot like that, like you don't really sweat, and it's just like it just feels like, you know, the heat is punching you in the face.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
yeah.
I sweat a lot. So that's one thing I've noticed, especially since I've been doing more cardio the past few months, is like my shirt is just drenched afterwards. And like now whenever I start to sweat, my body's like expecting me to be sweating for a while. And so it just starts pouring out. Like, okay, great. This is a great side effect. I love this. No, not at all. So yeah, that would kind of suck to be in that position.
Like, and yeah, it's, I know I'm
Glad that's not
complaining.
the case.
I know I am, and I know I shouldn't, but it's like, it just kind of, it's been like, and all in all, it's like, I think it's been fairly good. I mean, all things considered, like, it just seems like, because I even think about like that week when it's like, or that like that 3 week span when like Bounder died, and then some, like my Jeep started to crap the bed, and then, you know, it's just like,
And so does your dog.
like, wow. We put on a doggy diaper last night, and because we've become those people where because it was like a thunderstorm and stuff, and it's like,
okay, yeah.
We're not gonna like make her be outside all night, but then she soaked the diaper, and it's just like
you can't win.
I'm just like, no, this is for your benefit. Like, this is so that like,
yeah.
Why do you do this to us? She's like, because I'm a stupid dog.
Yeah.
I felt bad because I yelled at her because I put her out, and then it was like 5 minutes later, she's banging on the door to come in. She does this thing where she goes out, she wants to go out, but then she just can't calm down anymore. And so she's like she jumps up and like bang, like just like drops her paws on the door, and then stands there and waits for you. And then like you get like a minute, and then she goes poof, and just and this like, and it's so annoying.
Wow. I've never heard of a dog that knocks on the door. That's crazy.
Well, the Huskies are stupid smart. They're
It doesn't make any sense, but
well, yeah, they're actually bred for their intelligence and their stubbornness.
Yeah,
like because Huskies aren't the strongest in the pullers, but they're usually the leads, and so you want them to sort of have a bit of a mind of their own where they'll lead the sled in the safest path, because they'll hear the ice cracking, and they might ignore directions at times, but that's also like they're very willful and stubborn. And
interesting.
Yeah,
that's cool.
They're sort of bred for it. They're bred to be a little independent, and which makes Yuki, or Red and White, an absolute freak, because she is like the biggest like codependent baby on the face of the planet. Like follows my wife around, like does it like just welcome to the McKeever family circus. Anyways, so I mean, Eric, we talked the other night, or like it was like a week or two ago at this point, on PlayStation for a little bit, and the whole thing, like, so for the actual topic, when we get into it, man, there was that I thought about the conversation that we were having when we were talking about, like, one, I was thinking about the anime anecdote, how like you just said, like, sometimes when we start talking about anime, you're just like, I have no idea what you guys are doing, like, and you just sort of like tune out. And then that sort of further went into like the just talking to your parents about like games and stuff, and how even now they're sort of looking at it, and it's like they almost treat it as like a toy. And I thought like there was an interesting conversation to be had in that, just like talking a little bit about the generation gap, but also just, and how in a lot of ways gaming now is it is not just a toy, you know, it is way more than that. Like games in general are like a massively interactive media, but then also just like the different ways that like sort of the generational sort of approach to entertainment, if you would, like, and how, like, there are these, like, yeah, anime is a great example. It's like it's a form, and it's actually a pretty dominant form in a lot of like the younger kids. But like anyway, so that's like, as and like we'll just have a conversation about that, and then of course you're gonna do let's get judgy. You know, you're gonna
Sure.
you're gonna sort of
But I'll be. I love listening to you guys talk. But so what I said to Nate was that sometimes you guys are having discussions, and I'm going, but wait, but what about
Hmm.
this, or let's go deeper into this, or there's and yeah, the thing you were just talking about, Nate, is like there's times we're just so in sync, and I'm just like, yeah, these are my bros here. This is great. And then you guys talk about something that I have no knowledge, and it's something my son, is into or whatever. And I'm just like, wow, now, and it just kind of
Hmm.
springs up, and it's like, okay, yeah, we're in different generations, but then other
Yeah.
times we're right on track, and it usually, I mean, it's the gaming, but even within gaming, I mean, I'll tell you about some of the stuff, but even within gaming, um, I have big differences. I'm
Yeah.
weird. I'm very eclectic in my gaming,
Okay.
and I used to not be. Years
Hmm.
ago, I thought I'm just like an average gamer, I. But now I'm not. There's no way. So it's just weird. Over the years, it's changed.
Yeah.
And I was telling Nate, I mean, I'm on a complete. My only basis for picking a game to play is what am I in the mood for,
Okay.
and like I don't care about. I have a backlog. I don't care. I have no
Mhm.
interest
Okay.
in,
Which is
which
honestly,
is funny.
that's
Since
probably the
I'm on this
healthiest
show.
relationship to have with it, though, too, man. Is that, say, like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, sometimes I care, and I'm like, okay, I need to play it. I've got games that I've meant to play for years,
Hmm.
and I'm like, man, I really need to play this, and I'll start, and I'm just like, no, I'm not feeling it. I can't do this.
Yep.
Whereas years ago, I could do it. It used to
Yep.
be my son used to when he was younger. Um, and got old enough to start playing games and stuff, he'd be all over the place. I want to play this. I want to play that. And I'd be like, play something for longer than an hour, dude. What are you doing? And he'd watch me, and I would play, like I did 320 hours in Oblivion or something. And he's like, Dad, you're still playing that? I'm like, I'm playing every part of this.
Hmm.
And I just stuck. And he's like, "Well, play another game." I said, "No, I'm playing this one until I'm done, and then I'll move on to another game."
mhm.
So he just thought that was the weirdest thing, and I thought, well, he's got ADD, so he can't stay on one thing. And now I'm exactly like he was. I cannot. I'm like got three games going on, and then it's like, oh, what am I in the mood for? And then like
Hmm.
I just started another one when I should be finishing something else. That's why I've got much of my backlog is I played an hour or two.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll go back to this when I'm in the mood,
Right.
whenever that
Right.
is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't, I cared when I was buying, like I was buying games
Hmm.
and not even opening them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like just it was some kind of rush for the pre-order. This was a few, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I would buy almost every big game. Um, and I've gotten over that at least. I started feeling
Okay.
bad about that because I'm like, what am I doing? I'm just buying games and I never play them, or I play them 3 years later, which is just stupid.
Hmm.
So I've gotten over that. I don't buy that many games anymore. But it took a long time for me to do that.
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
not the fastest learner in terms of I'm very impulsive. Yeah, you have to watch
Hmm.
me when I go to the store. Man, if I go to Home Depot, I love tools.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just like a toy store in there.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'll go, "Where's the clearance bin? I'm finding something in there to get." because I have to
Uh-huh.
walk out of here with something.
Something.
But I'm not much of a handyman at all. I just like tooling.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, I try to fix stuff, but and
Yeah.
I mean, I'm watching YouTube all the time. I like to watch
Mhm.
YouTube videos where guys are making and fixing stuff.
Mhm.
That's my thing. It's like in another life, I could have been somebody that worked with their hands. But that's not me. So when I
Mhm.
ever do fix something around the house, it's an event. I announce it to my wife, and hey, I fixed this, and it
Yeah.
works now, and I don't have any parts left over. But that doesn't happen all that often. Most of the
Yeah.
time,
It's
I'll watch a
like,
YouTube video and go, "Can I do that? Yeah, I think I can do that. That looks pretty simple." And then I'll get into it. It's like a lot of plumbing stuff that looks simple, but then you get into it and there's corrosion and stuff, and I'm like,
Mm.
I can't take this thing off. How do I get, and then they're like, yeah, I just had this with a shower thing, and it's like, oh, heat it
Yeah.
up. So I said to my wife, ooh, I might get to buy a little propane torch thing or whatever those things are, butane or whatever it is. And she's
Mhm.
like, I don't think so. I don't want you with one of those. And I'm like, I never did do it, but I wanted to. I said, I got to heat
Yeah.
this up to get it off.
I need this to be hot so that I can. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So anyway,
Mm. Nice.
I am an accumulator as well. Like we every time we go into Walmart, it's like, yeah, it's like we're going in for like dog food or like whatever, it's like this is the one thing that we're going in for, and it's like I buy like a bunch of like the pens that I like, or it's like, you know
Oh
it's
yeah.
yeah, I feel that, like,
impulsive.
yeah.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
Mhm.
like, by the grace of God and sort of like growth and maturity and wisdom and all that, like I have, yeah, definitely like been like scaled back. Like it is
Mhm.
now, it is like it's a pack of pens, or it is something that is
Yes.
actually like semi useful. It's like,
That's how you do
but
it.
still, it's like,
Yeah, so I don't think I can ever get rid of that. I mean, you can tame it somewhat, but my thing
Mhm.
was I don't think I can ever get rid of it. So make my impulsive buys, cheap stuff that's not
Okay.
expensive. So I'm pretty good at that. I don't want to
yeah.
spend a lot of money on an impulsive buy. Although, well, I shouldn't
Mhm.
say I don't want to. I want to,
Well,
but I check
no,
myself if it's,
because
over 20 bucks or something.
there was something I did sort of pick up, and it wasn't completely impulsive. I mean, I considered it. I had sat on, but when I picked up the Valkyrie Elysium,
Mhm.
like the digital and then the physical, like less than a week later, I was just
Ah.
like, I want both of these things. Like, and it was just like, I think the justification there for me though in that was that I hadn't really, um, like, I there had been no real major expenditures. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, even sort of, so this year I've been tracking like my spending. That was by far, like, those two was the most expensive thing that I picked up. And it was like, and I was looking at, I think outside of that, I spent like maybe $50, $60 prior to that. So it's like, I'm still at sub $200 for the year as far like, and I might get God of War, shortly after it comes out. Maybe. I'm not even 100% there, but
Hmm.
yeah. So, well, let's Eric, I'm assuming you sort of know the forums, like it's been the backlog report, all that stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to be in for all that stuff too?
sure.
I just don't know if you're on a time crunch or anything.
No, I don't do anything. I got all the time in the world. I really don't.
Nice.
I just sit at home.
Hmm.
oh, I'm envious. I am envious. So, well, let's sort of just get cracking here.
Okay.
And
Da-da-da-da-da. I'm
yes,
sorry. I'm pulling at the.
Super high tech.
Okay. And away we go.
So the other week, right? And I tend to be like a little bit of a collector hoarder kind of thing, and I have some collectibles and figurines, and I had to explain to my wife that no, dear, these are not dolls and they are not toys. These are collectibles and action figures, and I would expect you to respect my collections. With that in mind, and that sort of brings us to, what we're going to be talking about today on the backlog breakdown. It's not just a toy, boys and girls. They're not dolls. They're my action figures. Actually, we're not going to be talking about action figures, but we are going to be talking about it's not just a toy. And yeah,
These toys tell stories.
they do. It is
Pixar.
the super toy. But yeah, that was obviously my co-host. I'm Nate, one of your hosts here, and there's my co-host Josh, and we're joined
Heyo.
this episode by a very special guest, our friend Eric the Judge Bryant.
Hey, everyone.
So
Hey.
and he is called the judge because he is actually a judge. So
Retired at this point, which
lucky you,
I'm
man.
not a judge. I work with judges, though.
So you judge what the judges are doing.
No. I help them judge.
Ah, I see.
So he was a judge. He was a judge when I think I gave him that nickname. Were you?
Yes.
Okay.
For 22 years, I was an administrative law judge for the state of Arizona.
Wow. That's
so you also picked up there that I'm also old.
I didn't say it. I wasn't gonna say it.
You can say it. Hey, I
Hey,
know.
listen. As I've sort of like, and again, like, I recognize as I get older, there's like sort of like categories, and it really is like, you're sort of in your 30s, and there's sort of a very 30s ish mentality, and there's a very 40s ish mentality, and there's a very 50s ish mentality, and then I was we'll get into, how about we just sort of move into the like how have you guys been? Josh, there's a question, or rather a phrase I like to bandy about, where it's like, you know what, Josh, it's been 2 weeks, and I like to sing a little bit, and I go, yeah, it's been 2 weeks since I talked to you, and you love it. You love it every time. You love it so much.
I got that reference the first time you did it.
Thank you. Somebody appreciates my craft here.
Yeah,
but
I like
it. Eric, it has been more than 2 weeks since we last talked to you. It's been a while, man. I mean, I talked to you a couple of weeks ago. We sort of got caught up on PSN. We did a little bit of party chatting. But yeah, it's been a while. So like, you're retired now, and you're just.
I'm just not judging.
Well, you're retired from judging.
Yes. But I still work for the state. I work at the Arizona Court of Appeals. And I'm a subject matter expert for those guys in workers' comp law and unemployment benefits law. So I help the judges with those cases. I call myself a ghostwriter for the court. I draft up their decisions for them, and then they take it from there and make it theirs and finalize it. And if they agree with my recommendation, sometimes they don't. But yeah,
that is pretty cool. I mean, like, it's one of those things where I sort of.
Yes, puns.
Thank you for laughing. I appreciate that.
I love puns.
Don't encourage him.
And you're a dad, so you have to do those.
Yes, all the time.
Nate will find out.
No, no, I'm gonna be the cool dad who doesn't do that. Um, It'll be like I'll be the dad where like the kids all come over and they're like, you know what, little McKeever, your dad is the coolest because he's not a total cornball. And then you know, and then I will just totally botch that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Once you get that dad, you'll want
Mhm.
more. That's I live for
That becomes the drug instead of like
yes.
your morning cup of coffee. It's like you need that one just exasperated. Oh, dad.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I live for that. I still do that. My kids are 30. Still do.
Oh man. But so yeah, man. I mean, how have you been? It's like I said, it's just been a while since. I mean, you've been on the breakdown before, but it's
Yeah, for
been a
golf.
long time. It's been probably a couple years, honestly.
Yeah, Backlog Golf was when I was on. I
That's
think
right.
that's the only time I've been on.
Yeah,
Pretty
I
sure.
think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've God's been great to me. I have the best job I could ever ask for.
Hmm.
It's so weird. Um, I work with the finest people. I mean, I did this thing where after I was there for a while, I started in 2019 working at the Court of Appeals, and I did this thing. I'm like, wow, there's about 12 of us. We're called staff attorneys. We help the court draft decisions. Um, and I'm like, all these people are really good, nice people. What? I'm like, there's no jerks. And then I remembered that old thing, if you're at the poker table and, you can't find what is it? You can't find
You can't find the sucker. You're the
yeah, you're the
sucker.
sucker. That's what I thought. So I guess I'm the jerk. Because those people are awesome. The judges, they're all really reasonable,
Hmm.
serious people that also don't take it that seriously. So now you have to understand that when I got out of law school in the old days in 1988, my first job was clerking at the Court of Appeals for one of the judges
Okay.
because I was a writer and a researcher, and I'm fascinated by the law in terms of in theory more so than in practice. Although you have both of those,
Hmm.
but I just love the idea of law and fairness and justice and all that stuff. So I
Hmm.
gravitate, and plus I was an English major
Mm.
in my undergrad, so I just gravitated toward writing and research. And so I wanted to clerk for a judge at a court, and that was my first job, and I loved it. It was so good, and I thought I want to get back here someday, and God let me do that, and sort of came out of nowhere, and I got back to there, and it's just I'm so blessed. And I will not retire because why should I? I mean, the job it's not stressful um, because it's appellate level law, so it's very deliberative. It's not fast paced.
Hmm.
The court does a lot of work. I mean, it's hard working. They churn out decisions a lot, so it's not like they're not working, but the pace is not fast. And I've been in, when I was a judge at the lower level, there were some times where it was really fast paced and high volume, and I hated that. I just had to do it the best I could, but that's just not me. I'm a very slow, in in some senses, also slow person, slow witted maybe sometimes. But no, I'm meant for this kind of work
Mm.
where it's just how to interpret the law. So we're mostly interpreting statutes and prior cases and that kind of thing. So yeah, God has been so good to me. I'm not going to retire. I've hit the mark where I could retire with the state with full benefits because I've always worked for the state of Arizona. So
Hmm.
I'm over 30 years with them,
Hmm.
but there's no reason for me to. In fact, we just got a nice raise, which is
Mm.
also weird in this economy. Um, but they're like, "Hey, we found some extra money. We're giving it to the staff attorneys," which is unheard. I've never been in a situation
Mm.
like that, especially with government. They don't normally do that, but these
Mhm.
people are awesome that I'm working with. So
Dude,
That
yes,
is
I
so
was a
cool.
judge for a long time, um, and now I read other judges' decisions and comment on whether they're consistent with the law.
Mm.
hmm. Very
Nice.
cool, man. And I'm glad that you've sort of hit a point too where like, it's there were two things when you were sort of sharing that with us, and I was thinking it was like one, you said you don't plan on retiring, which you know, and we were sort of before we actually started the recording proper, we were sort of talking, and I said like, I love my job. I'm sort of a very like, but when I have a bad day, I know like sometimes those days like I'm minutes away from like just like hanging it all up and just being like, nah, I can't do this anymore. Um,
Mm.
I I really like there will be a day like I would like to carry for 30 years total. Like
Mm.
30 like if I could carry into my 60s, but sometimes I do get a little concerned just because of the physical nature of the job, and it's
Yeah.
only getting sort of like more demanding, especially with the volume. But like
Mm.
I like that attitude, dude. Like I like the fact like and it's not like just like fruitless labor. It's like no, I love what I'm doing. What I'm doing is good. And by the grace of God, I'm just going to keep doing this,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so
The judges in Arizona have to retire at 70.
mm,
Okay.
There's a law, and I have to find out if that applies. I don't think that applies to me.
Mm.
I'm not. I'll be 60 in December. That's just
Okay.
so when I say old, that's what I mean. I'll be 60, which is weird. I don't think of myself as 60. It's weird getting old.
mhm.
I'm getting older. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
uh, so I'll work as long as they'll have me because, like I said, it's the best job I've ever had. I don't want to leave. It's perfect.
Yeah.
They like me. I'm expert enough in what I do that I'm
Mhm.
valuable to them, which is a nice position to be in as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Very
That's
cool.
awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, man. So Josh, now I know that your sort of like your fortnightly update is not going to be nearly as impressive as what Eric just shared with us.
No, no,
But
not in the
but
least.
I would like to know how your past 2 weeks has been. How has it been for you?
How has it been? It's been good. It has been very full, very busy, hopping around from different things. So I think I talked about it last episode. I did pick up a couple extra gigs, so recording and editing an audiobook, and then also working for a school for a little bit for some conferences that they had doing tech for them. So I was able to take some time off from the church in order to do that, but then just doing both of those kind of at the same time. And then on top of that, it's like back to school season or whatever. And so for homeschooling, that means picking out curriculum and stuff like that, and kind of planning for the next year. And so we went full force into that this past week. So um, it's a lot of good things. I feel like I accomplished a lot, which is great. But a lot of other things kind of fell to the wayside. I don't know if anyone else has felt it, but I have not been very present in the Discord lately, just because I'm
Mm.
like, sorry, not doing social media right now. Like I've got all this other stuff that needs to happen. Because once you start in um, on some of the stuff, there's a little bit of a rabbit hole that you can fall down into looking around and seeing what there is out there, especially for teaching curriculum stuff like that. So we're kind of new to this. I'm not necessarily new the homeschooling, because I was homeschooled. It's just now it's the other side of it of like, oh yeah, all the prep work that goes into it. I didn't have to do any of that. My dad did all that stuff.
Is
So
it?
now it's like,
Are
okay,
you
yeah.
doing that with your wife, or is it mostly you?
No, it is. It's actually mostly my wife,
Oh, okay.
but we're yeah, just like deciding on all this stuff now. And we have divvied up some of this. That was part of it too. Is like, okay, we have some flexibility. So why not kind of she does a couple subjects with them, and then so today it's Monday was kind of the first day we did it in full. And so when I got home, I did a science lesson with my kids and we had fun with that. And they're really enjoy. They're every parent says their kids are smart. Okay, so take it with a grain of salt. But they're still at the age where they're really curious and really enjoying learning new things. And hopefully that will continue. You know, especially I know it has to do with the way that we teach them as well. At least that's what I was in my experience.
Yeah.
But like the fact that they are totally on board also is super cool. So
Yeah,
enjoying
I'm
that.
fascinated by homeschooling because
Mhm.
I wanted to do that, and I really would have enjoyed it, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
And my wife didn't feel comfortable. I thought she could have done a good
Mhm.
job, but she didn't feel comfortable. And back then, when our kids were younger, schools weren't as bad, and we got in a good district. And then my wife just, she was in the schools with the kids,
Oh,
doing
nice.
stuff. So that's how it worked out. But I've
Yeah.
always thought, man, I think I would have been, you see the cat tail in front of me?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, we're in their house, so they go wherever they want. So anyway, but yeah, so I've always had this thing. I would have loved to have homeschooled. I think I would have had a lot of
Mhm.
fun and it would have been interesting, but never happened for us.
Yeah, it's all the ups and downs. So, you know, when it's good, it's really good, and then when it's difficult, it gets really difficult,
Yeah.
because there's no separation, you know? It's just like, okay, this is a part of life, like, everyday life now, and, yeah, no, it is totally different. Just again, not that I was in on any of the planning, that it was primarily my dad who did. I'm sure my parents made decisions together, but my dad also did the teaching during the week. Um, so, I know it's very different landscape now than back then, you know, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Just like there is so much more available, and even the proliferation of the internet makes things a lot easier. So like the way that I saw my dad piece things together was a lot more complicated than a lot of the stuff that's available now. So I feel like after kind of deep diving into it this past couple of weeks, that like I feel a lot more prepared, like, or like it's just easier. The problem is that it's such a what there's so many things available that you have to just
Oh
choose,
wow.
and
Yeah.
that's a good, like, that's a good problem to have. Case in point, there's a bunch of this is total side note, but there's tons of, like, you know, not support groups but groups on social media, you know, different Facebook groups and stuff like that. And the thing that I found really interesting is that uh like it feels like every other part of culture and society, and maybe this just because I live in Austin, Texas, which is a pretty liberal city. But every other part of society, when you're looking for anything that has any kind of like assumption of God or any kind of Christianity at all, it's usually pointed out where, like, in a lot of these homeschooling groups, it's the opposite, where people have to specifically ask, is this like, I'm looking for something secular. Which I'm like, that's really
Oh
cool
wow.
that Christians have done kind of the groundwork
Yeah.
and kind of built up so much that, like, in order to find something that does not acknowledge that God is the creator of all things, that you have to specifically specify that when you're looking for different things. So, anyways, as a side note, it's interesting. So, but that's kind of been on the forefront of my mind the past 2 weeks. So, although probably not as good and interesting as your stuff, Eric, I am probably equally as long winded. So sorry.
No, real quick side note. I was born in
Yeah.
Austin, Texas.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, but I never lived there really. My
Okay.
dad was in the Air Force. Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force, so
Gotcha. Yep.
I
Mm.
was there
That's
like 6 months from birth,
mhm.
and then we were out. But,
So you remember every moment of that.
yeah.
Well,
But my dad constantly reminded me that I was a Texan. It was kind of a
Nice.
joke thing. He was like, "Well, you're a Texan, you have to," like when we would drive, I guess had me convinced that when we crossed the border into Texas, I had to
Mhm.
stand up even if I was in the car because that's what Texans do. So he had me standing up
That's
in the
awesome.
car. Yeah.
Oh,
oh
that's
my,
awesome.
oh
I
my.
love it. I love it.
I mean, there's the whole like I don't know, like up here, it's like when we cross state lines, there's like a little game you play where you lift your feet, you know, or,
Hmm.
like
Jump
you lift your
rope.
feet on one side, and then when you see the sign says like you're now leaving Pennsylvania, you lift your feet, and then when it says like welcome to Maryland or whatever, then you put your feet back down. It's I don't know.
Gotcha.
That's but that's that
Probably
is
not
not
when you're
standing in
driving.
a vehicle. But Josh, I just sort of how was your little challenge there? How you know?
Oh yeah, yeah. The pretty much the same place as I was last week is that it's been because of kind of the change in schedule. It has not been as consistent as I would like for it to be. The times that I have been able to continue have been really beneficial. So it's like because there's been so much change, and maybe I'm just making excuses. Yeah, it hasn't been as consistent as I would like it to be.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, dude, like I was just gonna say, as far as like the personal challenge, like counting my calories,
Mhm.
I think I did it one day out of the last 2 weeks. Um,
Okay.
it was like somewhere where I was doing really well with it for months and months and months, and then like I got off it, and for whatever reason, it's been just like there's a bit of a mental just like I can't sort of like say like no, I need to be watching what I eat, I need to be counting calories, I need to like sort of just like being mindful there, and for whatever reason I'm like no, just I don't think it helped either. I mean it was a good thing overall, but my parents did come in not this last weekend but the weekend prior for a few days, and they basically helped us sort of get some stuff done. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
Megan, and my mom and dad got the one bedroom pretty much cleaned out and ready for the baby. They did a lot of work just sort of in the house with getting different stuff. Like my dad pretty much cleaned out our garage. Um,
Oh
you
wow.
know,
Nice.
he's one of those, and I was telling Eric this when we were talking. Like my dad is like, there's a story that I tell about my dad, and it's one of those things where I need to I want to sort of like it's very much I am sort of envious of my father's work ethic because like he was the
Okay.
middle of 9 kids. He was like grew up on a farm. It's like they did everything. And like he has always just had projects, like always has like something to do. Right.
Yeah.
He's actually like we were talking a little bit, and he's getting ready to retire here in a couple of years. He was a lineman for Penelec GPU. That's a utilities company up here. Like so, he did like
Okay.
work on power lines and stuff like that for years, and then he moved into the human resources and instruction side of things for a while. And so he would do curriculum development and training for linemen for, and then he moved into just some other stuff. But he kind of made that transition, and so he's sort of like I don't think he's officially retired, but he's pretty much retired. And he's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I was like, stop. I was like, and I was just kind of like messing with him. I was like, exactly. I said, I bet you have like 8 little projects just already like lined up in your head. I was like, and but I like to tell the story about my dad, right? So I don't know about you guys, but growing up, like we were expected, like especially me, I'm the oldest of four, and then my brother Deuce, Luke, he's the youngest, and there's 7 years difference. But then there's two sisters in between us, like all the kids were expected to help outside, but I was expected to I mean, like when I was like 13 and 14, like my parents bought this house and it was an unfinished shell, and like I basically would go out sometimes for just like 3 or 4 hours after school and help my dad do stuff, getting that house ready. And it was like always something like we were expected to, help, but it was like mow, and like my dad was just like, I don't like this tree, I'm going to cut it down. And then, you're expected to just help out. And at the time I totally hated it. But now I've come to sort of really cherish the fact that my dad was really just trying to instill work ethic in me. Right. And he was trying to teach me the benefits of working hard, and and he just wanted stuff done. But I tell this story that when Megan and I were dating, right? Dad, I told her what he was like, and she's like, it can't be that bad. And I said, no, it's like Dad says like, hey, I need help for a couple hours. And I said it, and it's all day. And I said, couple hours is code for till the sun goes down. And she was like, and she like kind of was like, no. I was like, no, I'm being dead serious. And so we go out to visit my parents, and we're dating at the time. And my dad's like, hey, could you give me a hand for an hour, Nate? I looked at her and I said, time it. And we went, and he cut a tree, and hold on one second here. Okay.
Keeping us in suspense here.
And anyways, he goes and he had cut down some trees and stuff, and he wanted like 3 hours later. 3 hours later, he's like, I need help for an hour. Okay. He's like, just give me a hand for an hour. I was like, okay. And like 3 hours later, I look at him and I said, hey, Dad, I'm gonna like dip out. Like, I'm done. Like, like, and she was just like, and he was out there for like another 2 hours. Like, just like,
wow.
And that's just how he's wired. And he just like, he goes and he goes and he goes. And I love that about him. And it was really helpful, and it was really encouraging. But it's like one of those things where I told, like, I tell that story, and I'm just like, yeah, my dad, like, that's like, can you help me for a couple hours? This code for like, this is not done until we can't see. Like, but and I very much like love and appreciate. When I was younger, I hated it. Well, because it's like when you're a kid, you want to like go and hang out with your friends and all. Yeah. And my dad was like, "No, I need your help here at the house," and that's just how it worked. I also like when I was 16, like they were like, "You got to get a job," and so like. They were very big. And I think a lot of that has been very formative for just like how I look at vocation and labor. And I didn't always appreciate it, but I do now. And like I said, they came out that weekend, and they helped. I mean, he brought his truck, and they hauled a bunch of stuff to the dump. So, yeah. But all that being said, it's, there's some other critical pieces of information, gentlemen, that we have to get into before we get into the episode proper. Man, this is okay. Yeah, Reba has a little bit of a head cold sort of thing going on. So Megan wants me to check on her before so when we got her, she just has like this head cold stuffy sinus thing that we still haven't managed to lick. But all that being said, and everything aside from that, it's time we need to talk about our backlog reports.
I do have. I've got that.
Josh has one, and that is, very fan. What is that? I can't even see it.
This was something they came home from. My kids came home from Sunday school with. A prayer for my teacher.
As a
prayer for mom and dad.
Whether that was a sound effect or you were actually doing that. So
I'm sorry, he's annoying sometimes.
Sometimes. Just sometimes?
It was a bit much.
They both said sometimes? Oh, that's great. That was great. I like it. We're going to be talking about childish things on this episode. My wife comes over in a Naruto t-shirt. Anyways.
Well, Eric, since you're our guest, man, why don't you go ahead and sort of like kick off? Like, what have you been playing? What have you been reading? What have you been into lately?
Okay, so I was playing Cyberpunk 2077.
Mm.
And I did something I've done before with it. I was doing all the and I was like, it's huge. You just have this map filled with stuff, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm going to take this little section here, and I'm going to get all those stuff done.
Mhm.
And I did that too long, and I kind of lost interest in it. I mean, it's a great
Mm-hmm.
game, although there's interesting things about it. I mean, this idea of the future, this night city, it's kind of cool, and it's realistic in the fact of it's really highly sexualized,
Mm.
but it's interesting to me that it's pretty much heterosexual. It's sexualized very heterosexually. There's not a whole lot
Mm.
of the opposite.
Mm.
And I thought that's weird. Why would they make that choice since, of course, everything's going the other way,
Mm-hmm.
supposedly. So that's one of the weird things about it, but it's a good game. There's a lot of systems in it, so you can get overwhelmed. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
got guns, you got mods, I forget, there's two things you can add to guns to change them. There's mods and something else, and I don't know. It can get overwhelming, but I'm enjoying it. I'm sure I'll go back to it. And I was right at the point where I was like, okay, I need to just go back and play the main story more and forget about the side quests because I got bogged down in that. When I was watching something on YouTube and they showed a clip of the Mad Max game, which I played
Okay.
Mm.
Yep.
into years ago, and I thought, oh yeah, Mad Max. So I started playing that, and now I'm hooked on that. And again,
Nice.
it's clearing. I'm clearing the map, but there's not as many things as there are in Cyberpunk, so it's
Okay.
more manageable. I'm making faster progress in it, so that's what I'm playing. That game is cool. It's got some issues, but some of the combat animations are really, I mean, they're brutal, but
Mm.
they're really intricate. Some of them, I mean, the combat, they worked a lot on the combat. It doesn't always work that well.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
That game, I would love it if they remastered it and cleaned up a lot of the
Give it some
issues.
quality of life stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
that game is cool. I mean, you really feel like, um, you're there. Uh, and it's very open. You do have to do a lot of driving, but
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not the biggest driving fan, but I don't know, it works in this game because it's part of it. So
Mm.
that's what I'm playing. Uh,
Nice.
Reading is so you have to know. I'm a I'm a student. I'm also a teacher, but I said this when I was in my I think I was in my 20s. I was still in school, and I said, "Man, if somebody would just pay me to just go to school my whole life, that's what I would do." I
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
love being in school. So I take classes, and now there's a lot of online stuff. Um, so this summer I'm in, I, jo- I joined this thing. I don't think I'm ever going to finish it, but I joined a master's program for a master's in American history and government. Because when I teach paralegal classes. I've done that for since 1990.
Mm.
And when I
Okay.
teach, I work in government, like what is government? How does government work? What's the purpose? That kind of thing. Because my sense is not too many people have civics in high school anymore. I always ask,
Mm.
and there still are some people that have it. I'm sure it's an elective type thing. I doubt anybody's required to take it, but part of my thing is that so many people don't understand how government works and they think that they can't. They think it's really complicated. And I guess it can
Mm-hmm.
get like that, but it's really, you can boil it down and everybody can understand and should understand how it works, why things are the way they are. There's purpose to it. Everything is that for a reason, and sometimes they're not good reasons. So
Mm.
I'm one of these people who likes to get information out. So when I do my classes, I do that. I found out about this program. It's fantastic. So I took the American Revolution class this summer, and what their their thing is, you read original documents
Okay.
rather than textbooks or books about an event. You read the people that lived the event.
Hmm.
Uh, and so we read a bunch of stuff from the Revolutionary period, and I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. I mean, I'm my favorite period in American history is pre-Civil War. How we got to where that happened. I mean, there's so many moving parts to that. It's
Mhm.
Hmm.
really interesting. So I didn't think I would like the the very beginning, but I found out there's a lot of moving parts to that too.
Hmm.
We read this book that was published in 1789, I think, that is a history of the Revolution. So
Okay.
it's kind of an original document in some senses, in that it was written by a guy who lived through the Revolution, and
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
really good. I mean, really good. The guy is a fantastic writer. It's pretty easy to read. It's not a hard read. Um,
Hmm.
his name is David Ramsey. He was South Carolinian guy, and that was fantastic. So now I got all these books I'm trying to read. I've got them lined up. Um,
Hmm.
Further stuff on the American Revolution, because the guy I had that was teaching the class, he said, we never talk about what's the British perspective of the Revolution,
Okay.
and he raised some fascinating stuff, like how do you fight a war in which you want the people to rejoin you. You're making war.
Hmm.
Normally, you're making war
Hmm.
against people you want to conquer, right?
Right. Right.
You're not making war against your. It was really more of like a brother. These are our brothers. We want them back into the British kingdom,
Hmm.
but we're
Yeah.
going to make war on them. So it
Hmm.
was like they had a really difficult task. It should have been on paper. It should have been easy. I mean, they had the best navy in the world.
Hmm.
They had the best, or at least one of the best, armies in the world. This was the British Empire at their peak. It
Yeah.
should have been really easy, but the one of the big problems was this disconnect between what they wanted, which was rejoin us, you're our brother,
Hmm.
and the tactics that they used. So it really hampered their generals, um, because they were going around trying to say, "Oh no, we'll just come back to us," and
Yeah.
people were like, "No, no, no, no." So anyway, that was fascinating. And then I just audited another online class on Athanasius, um,
Hmm.
which is one of my things. I don't have a lot of church history knowledge. I'm trying to get more.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and so there's a thing online called Davenant Hall
Mhm.
that has these classes, and I audit them. I This was my second one, and this one was Athanasius, and I didn't find him hard to read, but I wasn't he wasn't my favorite. Um, and I don't that goes into a whole nother thing. Guys, I could talk your ears off, but because I'm not, I discovered this over the years too. I'm not a big fan of devotional type stuff.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And I used to bother me. It used to be like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I like devotional types? And I still get that sometimes. See, I still think that sometimes. I'm not into it. What gets me going is theology. Like, that's what
Okay.
that makes me feel like worshiping is like theology. So that's what I like. And a lot of Athanasius' stuff it was a mixture, but there was a lot of devotional stuff in it. And I think that's why it wasn't just, hitting me. I wasn't that thrilled, but just learning the history of that, oh my Lord, you talk about politics and people. I mean, and he was a pretty savvy politician.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, we celebrate him for the right reasons. I mean, he held out against everybody, but
Hmm.
the times were so volatile. It's just crazy. I kept
Hmm.
rereading stuff to try and keep track of all the stuff that was going on. It was crazy. Um, and so he's fantastic for that. That part of history is really interesting and somewhat scary because it was government and Christianity coming together, and they didn't know, they were just doing what it is, which is impose Christianity on everybody.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not a good thing.
Hmm.
So they had all those, but it was interesting. It's just one of these things where, the more things change, the more they stay the same. You can learn a lot from studying history that will teach you things that you can use for current events.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's and that there's one more class which is on Friday, but I won't be able to go to that one because I have to go visit my parents, and I'll be
Hmm.
gone. So, but I was auditing, so I don't have to take the tests or anything. So
Yeah.
that's what I've been doing.
That's awesome.
Josh,
That's really cool.
And again, I don't expect your report to be nearly as robust as Eric's, but I do expect you to bring something to the table. So, what
Well,
what have you been playing? What have you been reading? What have you been up to?
I appreciate you setting the bar very low because I think I may just be able to meet it in that case. Because yeah, there's not too much to report on, but generally I'll start with video games. I did finish Mother 3, and although there were certain parts of that game that were spoiled for me going in, I had no problem with spoilers because I didn't think I would ever play it, and lo and behold, here I am playing it. But the ending was not spoiled for me, and although there was some very heavy foreshadowing, it was obvious who some characters were. What happens at the end of that game, that kind of in certain ways recontextualizes the game, not fully, but when it finally kind of comes to a head, what the game is saying, I was very taken aback. I'll put it that way. So yeah, no, it's we'll talk about it more when we have our episode on it, but it is very I was talking with Wes about it because of course he's the one who wanted us to play it, and I've early episodes of the podcast talked about Mother 1 and 2, so stoked to talk about 3 with him. And I feel like it's a game with a lot of dichotomies because in some ways it is very similar to Mother 1 and 2, and in other ways it is very different to Mother 1 and 2. In some ways it is very comedic and quirky, and just like I said last episode, it's one of the funniest games I've ever played. And in other ways it is dark and goes to some places, the talking about grief and death. Um, so in very good ways, it has these kind of dual sides to it, that are kind of unassuming. And then yeah, I talked about it again last episode, but so many like the translation for this game is so good, because there's so many puns that I don't know how they make it. I don't know if this is a Japanese pun because I don't know that it makes sense in Japanese. It makes sense in English. So um it was a very good experience, um and I have lots of feelings in different ways. So it's not like, oh, it's an amazing game. It's like, okay, no, there are things that we need to kind of pull apart with it. So um finished up Mother 3 and been continuing on hitting pretty hard Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'm still really enjoying it. There is a lot. It's a huge game, so I feel like I'm barely into it. I have no idea how it intersects with the other Xenoblade games that I've played. The story hasn't gone into anything that's like similar to the other games. I'm sure. I know it's like a shared universe thing. It's not necessarily a continue. It's not necessarily a sequel. But I'm enjoying it. The way that they do combat in this one too. There's a lot of different systems. I had to go to YouTube to kind of get some stuff explained. But once it's explained, it's actually really really cool the way that it all works together. So I am really digging that. But that's basically all that I've played is just those two games. In terms of reading, still a little bit of progress in Gentle and Lowly, but I am really appreciating that book. I think, yeah, it has some really good stuff to say, and stuff that like comes up while like during my times of worship. It's just being reminded of who God is. So, yeah, it's been really good, although I haven't finished it yet. And then also my wife approves. She got it for me. So the fact that I'm finally getting around to reading it, I'm sure she appreciates that as well. And then I listened to a book called here, I'm going to pull it up on my phone. Sorry, great radio. It's a book about culture. What is it called? A Practical Guide to Culture, helping the next generation navigate today's world. It has a lot of good thoughts. It's kind of a little bit all over the place, but it was an interesting read. He doesn't go in depth into kind of any of the subjects, but he kind of touches on a number of different cultural subjects. So if you haven't like thought about the way that culture affects you and in a plethora of different ways, it can be helpful, but it is pretty it's very much just an overview of a number of different things. It never really goes very deep. So it can be helpful. But yeah, it was all right. By a guy named John Stonestreet, I believe his name was. And then I tried to listen to something else, but I was so fatigued from recording and editing another audiobook on the side that I was like, I can't listen to anyone else talk in audiobook talk anymore. Like I need to go to podcasts so they sound like just conversational because my brain can't take it any longer. So
was that
that's all.
something that I had actually shared with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I listened to, and he's Brett, like he delivers well his reading. Like it sounds natural. It is absolutely nothing against him. My brain was just like, no, please.
No,
I
there's
can't.
very much like if you don't have anything else, I'll just take this opportunity to segue.
Nope.
into
Nothing else. Yeah. Go
mine.
for it.
So, the book he's probably referring to, or that he is referring to, is The Wisdom
Mm-hmm.
Pyramid by
Yep.
Brett McCracken. He wrote a book a few years ago called the Hipster Christianity, or Christian Hipster, or something like that. Like 10, 12 years ago, he wrote that one, and I read it, and it was sort of an interesting sort of examination of like, at the time there was there was a lot of like, that was sort of like the Young Restless Reform stuff was really starting to kind of like ramp up. The emergent church and Young Restless Reform stuff was really kind of ramping up, and there was a lot of like cultural and social activism going on, and there was a lot of where you would see basically churches partnering up with non-parachurch organizations in order to do good work. Like the one in particular that I was actually part of for a while was Invisible Children, which their primary mission was to rescue and to raise awareness about the children soldiers in the Congo, and to like fund rescuing them. So that was, and it was stuff like that, and Hipster Christianity. I think that's but that one was about like sort of how like there are times when the church can sort of link arms with the world around them and sort of like do good works, but we aren't. And like there are times when Christianity and sort of what it's about can be culturally cool, but we don't chase that. Like we just, when it happens, we're like, hey, this is cool. And then when the world sort of moves on to whatever. And so the entire book is like sort of about that. But it's also been like, 10 years since I read it. So, but it was an interesting book, sort of caught my attention. I remembered reading it and enjoying it. And I've followed McCracken on social media for a while, and he was tweeting something out, and he had another book, and I don't think it's like new. Like, I think it's his latest book, but I don't think it's like just dropped, but it is called The Wisdom Pyramid. And it's really, he's sort of, for the audiobook version, it was like 4 hours, 5 hours to listen.
Yeah.
To it. So I think
That's
I listened to it in the space of like 2 days. It doesn't seem like it's going to be like, I'm actually going to buy the book because it's sort of falling into a space sort of like in pop theology and the self-help stuff that I kind of like when I'm not trying to wrestle with, like when I'm not trying to like just feel stupid and wrestle with texts that are like way above my weight class, like, the principles of conduct, or, the institutes, or, there's really smart stuff that I try to read. And then I'm like, I'm dumb. But I feel it's good to like throw yourself against that stuff every once in a while, like to hit the heavy bag. Right. But like, McCracken sort of falls between actually a book that Josh and you and I read, and I explained it this way. It sort of falls actually between two books for me. Sort of, it's a little bit of like Jamie K. Smith's, or K.A. Smith's, You Are What You Love, and Mike Easter's Comfort Crisis. It sort of falls between the two, and his primary sort of area of examination is sort of how we interact with social media. And there are these sort of like, I think he gives 5 like realms where he's like, basically sort of saying like, there are these 5, and he uses the food pyramid as sort of a, example, but anyways, the illustration isn't all that great, but he basically says like, the fact of the matter is like, we sort of have, we're a little topsy-turvy in today's culture. And he doesn't go out and just say like, social media is terrible, we need to completely abscond from it. He actually says we just need to develop a healthy relationship with it. And he's like, and that means actually understanding what it is and using it sparingly and wisely. So he talks about like the different sort of foundations of wisdom, starting in scripture, then moves on to the church, then natural revelation. Then I think he even sort of just says like touches into like broader cultural stuff. And then he's sort of the last little category he touches on is like social media. He's like, can it be helpful? Can it be a tool? He's like, social media does a lot of really cool things. But it's like drinking from the fire hose. And it's in a lot of ways, I don't think he ever specifically phrases it this way, but he touches on sort of, I think, what Mark Garcia from the Greystone Institute has said before, where part of the problem of social media is that, and again, this is me sort of synthesizing what McCracken and Garcia would say, but part of the problem is what social media does is it throws a ton of information at you, like tons and tons and tons and it's almost a functional omniscience. And what we don't understand, and sort of this actually ties back to like, I've become much more of a localist in my perspective, politically, socially, but what we don't sort of come to grips with is you are not designed to like, there's some people who can operate on a very like large bandwidth and who can sort of like operate with like tons of like fires in the iron. He's like, but most people have a very limited frame. And the dilemma is that you have all of this input coming in, all of this social media stuff, and there's all this knowledge, and knowledge ultimately requires action. Like, so it's like when you receive information, you need to do something with that. So when we hear about the Ukraine, you need to do something with that. When you hear about whatever, you need to do something with that. And it's not to say that like everything, and part of even like the wokeism and all the junk we see on social media. Anyways, part of the problem that we're really sort of dealing with when it comes to social media is there, like, you're drinking from the fire hose. There's all this information. In a lot of ways, you are absolutely impotent in your ability to act on most of it, like 90% of it. Whereas the things that you can actually do and act on around you, you're not paying attention to because the fire hose is just like blasting you full in the face. And we keep going back to the fire hose. And so like our hearts and our minds and our souls are sort of like decaying a little bit because like the context in which we're supposed to be investing in and flourishing in, like our local communities, our local churches, like the people beside us, like we're neglecting them. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, but he basically like, it's a really sort of interesting book. And again, it just sort of like, I really liked it. It's a quick, pretty easy read. I mean, McCracken gets a little hippy dippy, especially when he's talking about like natural revelation and nature. And I mean, I appreciate it. I'm also kind of like, I wouldn't go that far. But I really thought what he brought was pretty refreshing. Because he's saying like, hey, no, it's like, and he's not even saying, he's like, some people probably should just step away from social media altogether. He's like, but for most of us, it's really learning to put this thing in its proper place. And as a sort of a source of wisdom or information or whatever, it needs to be at the top of the pyramid, not because it's the best, but because it's what we ought to be engaging with the least. And I really, and it's sort of like you pair it with like things like digital minimalism and I don't know. Like I said, it's one of those books where I liked it enough listening to it that I was like, I'm going to get a physical copy of this. Cause it's like one of those ones I'm going to go through and like earmark and underline and think about, because I think some of his theses are really cool. That being said, that's been my, I mean, and that's sort of like, I mean, that's my wheelhouse. Like, it's like when, like I love thinking about the way we interact with media in general. That's you know, part of what we do every couple of weeks.
Here we are.
and here we are. And we're going to get there. But in sort of lighter fare, there's a comic book series that I've been reading called Shaolin Cowboy. It's really weird. The main character is like half John Wayne, half Shemp from the Three Stooges, or maybe Curly from the Three Stooges. Like he's also Shaolin monk that just like he has like a chainsaw bow staff. It is absurdist. Like,
so a pole saw?
No, it's a bow staff with two chainsaws on the end of it. Like chainsaws on each end. So it's like two pole saws put together, and it's absurd, and it's not pretty. It's not like one of those things I'd recommend if you like the kind of like weird things that I like. And you know, it's like when I talk about like really bizarre books, and you're like, oh no, I like that thing that Nate read. This is up there. Another thing, and this is not an open-handed recommendation. It's like, I'm reading it and I like it and it's weird and I know it is. It's absurdist and just kind of, it's a comic book, but it's like hard into that, like the new weird, kind of fiction that I'm into. But then sort of in something that's a little not as weird, and here's the problem, right, with this next one. This is not a recommendation. This is just saying, I watched it, I enjoyed it, and in many cases, I would say for most people, probably shouldn't. But I watched The Sandman on Netflix by Neil Gaiman's.
I knew that's where you were going.
And here's the thing, I love Neil Gaiman. And like, if I believed in guilty pleasures, he's my guilty pleasure. That man like writes, and I'm like, I'm going to buy the book and I'm going to read it, even though I probably shouldn't. Because he's just such a stinking talent. That I love the way that he sort of like, he hammers, he's a wordsmith. He's a real master of his craft, and he's a narrative genius. And freaking Sandman is awesome. Like, if you like Neil Gaiman and you can consume his stuff in good conscience, The Sandman on Netflix is pretty much, there are some changes, but none of it is super substantial. There were some issues, like the one thing that I know some people were kind of not up in arms, but a little frustrated with, was the shift from John Constantine to Joanna. And that has actually more to do with like who holds the legal rights to John Constantine. Like we were talking about a little bit in our one chat, Josh, with Wes, and John Constantine shows up in the CW, so his television rights are actually held by a different company. And unless they released that to the Netflix production studios, like, so that's more of a legal thing than anything else. And but I mean, there's some, like, some of the characters in the comic book, they're portrayed as like white or whatever, but in the show they're black. And it's like it's not a substantial difference. It doesn't change the way that character plays or the interacts. What I will say is that in this first collection, it goes all the way up through the first Rose Walker saga or series. And if anybody's familiar with that, two of those arcs or like stories are the John Dee story in particular is really pretty intense. And then the actual sort of culmination of Rose Walker's story is pretty intense. So, like, again, I'm not anybody who's like paying attention. You're not going to watch this with your kids, like, unless your kids are.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But like, just like, it's not really trigger warnings. They're heavy, and it's like they're like they're a little grotesque at times. Not super. Actually, like, and it's weird because, like, I mean, Gaiman's a pagan. He just is, and he's like, but the actual sexual content is pretty minimal and pretty tame.
Okay,
there's not a lot of like, but I don't think there was really anything super perverse in any of the stories that they tell. Actually, but yeah. It's, if you like Neil Gaiman and you like the Sandman stories, I found these to be a really pretty spot on adaptation of like the first, I don't know, it's like the first two volumes or whatever. I don't know. Like, it's hard to, because it was a bunch of comic books and then they did like trade paperbacks. And I think it's up to like book 3 or 4.
Yeah, I read the first trade paperback, and I think that goes through him getting all his things back.
His objects of power, or his marks of his office. His mask, his ruby in his bag.
Yeah. And then I watched the first episode of the Netflix thing, and I thought, wow, this is really good. I'm going to keep watching it. I just haven't got back to it yet. Did you watch American Gods, Nate?
I want to so badly. My problem with American Gods is that, one, it's a Cinemax, and they lean really heavily into like the fan servicey bits. And there's the one, I can't remember her name, but the Babylonian goddess, that she's pretty graphic, but I just was like, I want to. That's a book. Like,
I don't think. I mean, I watched it, and I sort of, by the end of it, I was like, okay, whatever. The concept is brilliant, but the story, it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be.
Have you read the book? Because the book is masterful. Like, the book is brilliant.
The concept is just fascinating.
Oh, dude, it's super rad.
Josh, do you know what it is?
No. I mean, I know that American Gods was a TV show, but
they're the old gods, and then there's modern gods that are like, media is a god.
Okay. And there's like, there's trains, like Well, the trains actually fall into the older pantheon in the show. Like I know that, but it's like transportation, like all of like the different booms, like fame and like internet and everything, like sort of all of the new gods. So like media, technology, they're actually in sort of like a shadow war with the old gods, but they're all ideas. They're all the personifications of these ideas, these things that we worship. Right. And it's a really fascinating sort of, Eric, read the book because I think you'd really like the book. And the book is a heck of a story. And that was part of my problem was like when I saw that they were running that thing like 3 seasons long, I was like, there's not 3 seasons of like, like I don't know. Anyways. Yeah, American Gods, though, I really like because I know you like it, Eric. I'm like, read it because I know you like Neil Gaiman. And, you know, but it's also one of those things where I'm like, this is not carte blanche. There are a lot of people who should not read that book. Like, just that's like one of those like heavily gated sort of material for me. But, anyways, lastly, as far as games I've been playing, and we'll sort of to round this out, I have been pretty light on gaming lately. It's been Mother 3 last night for a few hours, and then the weeks prior, I sat down and I played Monster Hunter World with my brother a couple of times, and Parker, and that's really been it. Like I've just kind of been struggling on that. Like I've just. Eric, you were saying like sometimes you just like you play what you feel, and like I'm like I'm kind of like I don't feel like playing anything, but because of the nature of this podcast and there's a whole bunch of games, it's like, and I'm enjoying my time in them. It's just, Anyways, all that being said, sort of rounding out, and Eric, I know that you aren't doing the beatdown. You don't sort of really do the meta. But Josh, have you is there any updates to your beatdown score? Are you still at like -12 or whatever it was?
Yeah. Well, now it's -13. I haven't picked up anything else, but finished Mother 3. And so since I purchased that from Amazon Japan, the tail end of last year, it counts for this year. Dang it. So, so yeah, that was one extra negative point.
Okay. My score there is another update because I picked up another thing. Code Vein was on sale for like 10, 11, $12. And I like Souls likes. I like the Souls genre as a general rule. And I've heard that this is a pretty like top shelf Souls like. And it's got co-op. So Deuce or Parker and I actually think it's only 2-man co-op, but like I'll probably roll through that with one of them at some point. So that puts my beatdown score at -3. As soon as we and that's the thing, I was like sort of doing some math. As soon as we get like Monster Hunter World, last time I looked down on how long to beat, it's over 35 hours. So as soon as we roll credits on that, which will put me at -5 again. And then I'm sitting on Mother 3, and I've got like, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Like once I actually start sort of feeling things again, there will be a whole bunch of stuff just sort of flying off, and I'll get that back down to a much more respectable number. But speaking of the beatdown, GG app is the official app of the Backlog Beatdown. We like the GG app. We like its creator, Charles Watson, or as we have come to sort of affectionately name him, Chuckle Dubs. GG is a letterboxed app for your video game collections. You can do custom lists. You can sort of see what your friends are playing. You can rate and review and sort of all the different games. There's all sorts of different sort of sorting criterias. It's a pretty cool app. He actually has there's a free tier where there's no, obviously it's a name, it's free. But he also offers an elite option. And, for if you were interested in sort of checking out, it's $5 a month or $50 a year. With the elite tier, you get a unique role in his Discord server. You get access to early builds and stuff. It's a cool app. and again, like I said, we love Charles, we love GG app, and we really think you ought to check it out if you're not already on it. And other things that we hope you like, it's us. We hope you like us. If you're listening to this, and you've already subbed, you've already rated and reviewed us, and you've already done the sharing and the caring, you know, and you're looking for a way to sort of go a little bit above and beyond, we have a tip jar. Actually, well, think of it as a tip jar, but we have a Patreon. We have actually one of our patrons on here. Eric has been a patron for a while now. And, you know, we don't really set a price on it, but patrons, you know, there's exclusive content. So you get early and uncut access to every one of these episodes. There's usually a video feed, unless we have, in our last book club episode, there was some technical hijinks, and that kind of made the actual book club episode a moot point. It was not happening. But there's there's an exclusive podcast called the Brohang that's available to patrons. Like I said, and there's a little bit more access to us as a general rule. One of the perks is, you know, we were talking about this off mic, but there's still a pile of games that we played Dragon Quest XI earlier this year. That was actually a patron nomination. And so we've got to get an episode done for that. But then, you know, we've still got a couple patron games to sort of get going here. And, you know, again, it's just one of those things that if you like what we do and you'd like to go a little bit above and beyond, you know, it's there. Last but definitely not least, we are proud members of the Playwell Network alongside our friends Wesley. I'm correcting myself. Mr. Wes, the Henshin Dad himself, aka Wesley Ray, the man, the myth, the legend, and our friend Paul Lytle, the artist currently known as the Techno Funk Boy. They both have some podcast media in general, and Paul's in the midst of sort of, I think, rebooting some of his stuff potentially. Wes has got a whole bunch of Henshin Dad stuff, and I don't know if it's going to be a Pwnecast or not, if he wants to affiliate with us, but he's got another project sort of in the works that I'm pretty sure he is super excited to sort of unleash on all of us. But we love them, and we love those guys. We like what they do. And we really think that you would benefit from checking out their stuff. With that being said, here's a word from one of them. So,
a word. That's not one of them. But.
The word is glass.
Oh, yeah. But anybody need a break or like I actually do need to run to the bathroom real quick. So, okay. Give me like a couple minutes. I'm going to, and while I'm out, I'm going to go check on my cat, and then I'll be right back, and we'll sort of hop into the main body of content. All right.
Sweet. Then I'm going to go ahead and hit stop.